everybody. So I had to introduce Scott Galloway. It's the most unlikely relationship I've ever had with a man. He's not Walt Mossberg, I would say, who was a wonderful partner for 2 decades. But Scott and I have a really unique chemistry. We think Pivot is fantastic. We actually have so much fun doing it. It's a pleasure to do it. And what I really like about it is we disagree about a lot of things, but we do it in a funny way, a civil way, and an insightful way, where we actually learn things about each other and about things that we didn't realize we knew about. We love doing the show, but of course, as usual, he's cheating on me again, or attempting to. He tried to go to Bloomberg, that didn't work. But he's going on CNN Plus, and he's doing No Mercy, No Malice. It's gonna be a great show. So we're gonna be a real addition to the repertoire there. They're building something really interesting, I think. And I'm very excited for him to do so. So please watch him on there. We will continue to Pivot and our Pivot Con that we're coming up with in Miami in February, which should be a lot of fun. We're gonna focus on climate tech, healthcare, and sort of really fast forward things, psychedelics, things like that, which we're gonna talk about tomorrow, actually. In any case, Scott is a great guy. He's a great presenter. This is gonna be a great presentation he's doing. And so I want you to bring it on for Scott. I really, really, really love working with him. And I'm excited for this presentation. Scott, get out here.
First time on stage in 18 months. I feel like I could throw up. All right, my name is Scott Galloway, I teach at NYU, and I appreciate your time. I've got 158 slides in 3,100 seconds, so let's light this candle. These are my investments, just disclosure. Exciting slide. Some more disclosures. I've said publicly, I think investing in Snapchat is like driving drunk. I think it's something no responsible person should do. You are handing your money over to a 27-year-old with no rights in the stock, 3 classes of stock. So I added this slide because I see CNBC's outside. I hauled my ass to Wall Street every Wednesday for about 5 years. And then one Wednesday, they just didn't call me. And then the next Wednesday, they said we had a scheduling conflict. No one called me, no one said. So immediately I went to, okay, why have I been canceled from CNBC? And I immediately went to conspiracy theory. And what I realized last night is actually, I may just suck. This is when I predicted Snap was like driving drunk or investing. And I was right for a little while, and now it's gone to $90 a share. My most famous call is I said that Tesla was going to get cut in half when it was at $70 a share. And I was right for a hot minute. Now it's at 740. So in sum, the real disclosure is I get this wrong all the time. Okay. Decades and days. There are decades where nothing happens, and then there are weeks where decades happen. Originally attributed to Vladimir Lenin, that's not true. It was MP member George Galloway, but Lenin's more gangster, so I've been saying it's Lenin. So COVID hit, and we turned to God. No, we turned to Google. And it's interesting, the searches. My favorite is how to keep kids busy. But we immediately started loading up on news. Social media became more and more addictive. The biggest bet right now is whether the CCP is going to just wrap the knuckles of TikTok or its Chinese kind of champions, or if it's going to cut off their hands. If it doesn't cut off their hands, I believe TikTok will be one of the 3 most valuable companies in the world within 5 years. Big tech has added the GDP of Germany since COVID broke out. We all know it's great. They've operated great. They've done a great job. This has been terrible for America. If Walmart stock had gone down 40% and Amazon stock had gone down 60% instead of up 40 and up 60, we wouldn't be wearing masks right now. This would be in our rearview mirror, because when someone walked into Walmart or at Walmart without a mask, we would tase them first and then ask questions later. The dirty secret of this pandemic is the shareholder class is living its best life. It means more time with Netflix, more time with family, and your wealth has exploded. So stop, it hurts so good. There hasn't been a full-throated capitalist response to this virus, and the result is death, disease, and disability, because we've decided that we need to bail out everything. And now that this pandemic has largely been outsourced to people of color and seniors, we've decided to use it as cloud cover to create stimulus that pours money into the market and explodes the wealth of the already wealthy. You know it, my brother. That's why I'm here. Okay, data crack, it's the best I could come up with. Silver lining, by the way, I'm gonna tell LA stories in silver lining. I grew up about 3 miles from here. So I'm gonna try and incorporate some silver linings and also, not to be just totally Debbie Downer, and also some LA stories. So there is some silver linings. A lot of this has turned to innovation. There's been incredible, there's some plants that are pyrolytic that only germinate during a fire. The architecture in London, incredible renaissance after the great fires of London. Post-World War II, we turned enemies into allies with a visionary investment. A lot of wonderful things can come out of crisis, and we're seeing a ton of innovation. New business applications are soaring, record levels of funding going into new businesses. Valuations subsequently have exploded in the private markets. This is our graphic of a unicorn. That's what my creative team did last night. What did you do? But just to put this in perspective, you can take every unicorn in the world, that's a private company over $1 billion, take them all, and they're still not as big, or Apple is almost as big. And Apple, of course, is worth more than the 100 biggest companies in the UK. So basically, Apple has become kind of its own G7 economy. And people say that the markets climb a world of worry. Well, they've been escalating and climbing very fast a world of worry. That it seems as if things have gotten worse, the markets keep going up. If you had a crystal ball and you knew that more people were going to die in this tragedy than have died in every other war, but that's all the crystal ball would tell you, would you say, I'm going to go buy stock? It's just really the kind of land of unintended consequences what's happened here. So we got very excited about all this new money pouring into the market, stimulation, a lot of people home with their phones, a lot of time on their hands, and a lot of incremental capital and human capital has gone into investing in mobile ads. And this is at the same time when we lost more people in 1 month than we lost in all of the recent conflicts and wars. And if you pull that out, you could take every war that America has participated in, and as of now, we have lost more American souls. Now, people will say it's not apples to apples because it was younger people that we lost in this war, a greater percentage of the population. But we've never, hopefully, this is the kind of seminal event or tragedy of our lifetime. So I'm fascinated with Daniel Kahneman's work around slow and fast thinking. It's very difficult to process what's going on. And so we go to our system one kind of fast thinking. We're friend or foe, fight or flight, and we make quick decisions. And we either decide something is very good or very bad. And there's not a lot of room or time for nuance. And that's the subject of this presentation, or the construct through which I'm trying to filter these views. And that is, I think we look at things as either being very good and we overhype them, or very bad and we underhype them. When I say underhype, they don't get the attention they receive or the valuation they receive. And overhyped is they're capturing too much of our human capital and attention and are probably overvalued. Okay, so the first thing is, I think one of the biggest threats and something that's been overhyped is exceptionally, purposefully, artificially constrained supply that results in exceptionally low admission rates at what has become the enforcer of the caste system, and that's higher education. Me and my colleagues have become so drunk on self-aggrandizement and arrogance that we take pride in turning away 60, 70, 90, 95% of applicants so we can feel more important about ourselves. America is not about exceptionalism, America is about acceptance, and we have totally lost the script across higher ed that no longer see ourselves as public servants, but as a fucking Hermes bag. It is a very negative forward-looking indicator of where we are when the only two cohorts that get into the most transformative experience in the United States, which is a college degree, in terms of income, opportunities, health, And we decide that the two cohorts that should have access to it are, one, the children of rich kids. You're 77 times more likely to get into an elite university if you're a top 1% income earning household child. There are now 33 of the top 100 schools have more people from the top 1% income earning households than the bottom 60%. Or you're freakishly remarkable. And I would argue, and I can prove to you mathematically, while we'd like to believe all our children are freakishly remarkable, I can prove to you that 99% of our kids are not in the top 1%. Spring used to be a time of joy and nervousness. It's morphed to a time of despair, where good kids are now turning to their family and say, I've been arbitraged down to a second-tier school because the top 100 are drunk on luxury, but I have to pay a tier 1 price. Families are faced with terrible decisions. Do I go into debt to pay a Mercedes price for a Hyundai product? It's not what we're supposed to be doing. We used to be about acceptance, opportunity, and academics. We've become about exceptionalism, the enforcers of the caste system, and prestige. Harvard, if it were a country, would be the wealthiest country in the world. If you stacked Princeton's endowments in $100 bills, you couldn't have commercial airline traffic because the stack would be higher than 7 Burj Khalifas. They say, the admissions director says they could have filled their freshman class with 6 times the number of applicants or admittees with no sacrifice in quality. And the question is, when you're sitting on the endowment of the GDP of Costa Rica, well, then why wouldn't you, boss? We sit up here and we have all these people talk about how they're scaling their companies at 30 or 40% a year. We know there's tremendous negative externalities, but we can't figure out a way to scale the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, or UC Riverside at 4%. We just can't figure it out. This is my first LA story. I went to school just a few miles up here. It's obvious. I know what you're thinking. I haven't changed a bit. Seriously, what the fuck happened? When I applied, 74 people got in out of 100. The acceptance rate at UCLA was 74%. I had to apply twice. True story. I was installing shelving at 18 bucks an hour, which seemed like a lot of money at the time, and hanging out and getting high with my coworkers. And on the way home from Ontario, I'm like, I don't know. This isn't what I want to do the rest of my life. So I appealed and I got in. Changed my life. Today, 12 people get in. Is this good for America? We just don't have the option to reach into the homes of people of unremarkable kids raised by single immigrant mothers and give them the kind of opportunities that my generation got. I do think there's some silver linings here, and the first is that I think you're going to see the brand equity of public institutions soar, mostly because the rankings are changing. And for the first time, we had a public university. My alma mater for graduate school was ranked #1 because Forbes has decided to include access in their ranking. And whereas Pell Grants used to cover 80% of tuition, they only cover 30% now, but they've decided that access is an important feature. And the University of California, Berkeley will graduate more kids from low-income households this year than the entire Ivy League combined. Some silver linings. Yeah. Go Bears, right? Coursera and Google, I'm seen as a critic of big tech. I think what Google is doing in terms of certificates is wonderful, and I want to acknowledge college isn't for everyone, and we need to create more on-ramps to great middle-class lives, and I think tech is doing that. The most interesting thing in higher education didn't happen in higher ed. It happened at Apple and Tesla and other firms that have decided they're going to create on-ramps and ways to evaluate people on their skills as opposed to their certification, and are allocating a certain percentage of their entry-level jobs to non-college grads. That's probably the most important thing that's happened in higher ed. I think there's an emerging crisis. We talk a lot about income inequality. I think there's an emerging crisis in mating inequality. And if you look at the Gini coefficient, there's actually greater mating inequality now in the US. I was on CNN on Saturday, and I got a lot of email and a range of emotions around this. But effectively, Tinder and online dating will now be the primary means through which people pair off or not pair off. It used to be school and work. It's turning into online dating. And you have basically exceptional young women going to college. There's probably going to be this year or next year 2 female graduates for every male, largely because they have their act together more at a younger age and they deserve to get in. And we're seeing an explosion in the disparity. Now, why is that bad? When there's 100 people on Tinder and 50 men and 50 women, 46 women show all their attention to 4 men, leaving 46 men to fight over 4 women. And in sum, women, at least on Tinder, appear to be interested in men that not only have resources, but signal their ability to garner resources in the future. In sum, women aren't interested in pairing off with men who don't have college degrees or women with college degrees. I thought this was one of the scariest stats I've seen this year. In 2008, just 13 years ago, the number of men that had not had sex before the age of 30 was 8%. And people hear the word sex and all sorts of neurons begin firing, but think of it as a key step to establishing a relationship. It was 8%. As of 2019, it's now 28%. It's probably 33 now. If we maintain this trajectory, in 5 to 7 years, when you walk down the avenue that is America, there'll be twice as many young women with college degrees, and 1 in 2 men will have never established an intimate relationship by the time they're 30. And you think, well, why is that a problem? If women deserve that, why is that a problem? And loneliness just isn't a problem for men, it's a problem for women. Just as digitization creates consolidation in e-commerce and in social media, I think it's creating consolidation or a winner-take-all dynamic in mating. And the result is that about 10% of the men are having 80% of the sex, which means they are not incented to establish long-term relationships and have children. And the bottom 50% of men, in terms of attractiveness, don't have access to mating at all. I think this is dangerous for society. The most unstable societies suffer what I call Porsche polygamy. And that is, wealthy men get too much access or too much attention, and there's an entire cohort of the most dangerous person in the world, which is a young, broke, and alone male. And we're producing too many of them. And so what's the answer? Should we have fewer people of color or fewer women admitted into universities? No. We should have more. And we should have a lot more men. And we need to, again, start scaling our great public universities at a fraction of the rate we come to celebrate the way we're scaling other companies and other organizations. Healthcare. I think this is the most disruptive industry and will create more shareholder value than any industry in history over the next 10 years. US healthcare, 17% of our GDP, $3.5 trillion, 4 out of 5 people aren't satisfied with it. And there's a lot of exciting things. Pre-pandemic, less than 1% were virtual visits to the doctor's office. Now it's 1/3. It's estimated that 2/3 of all healthcare spending could be digitized. You can't get an appendectomy on your iPhone, but you can get the consultation, you can get the drugs prescribed, you can get the physical therapy. The idea, the opportunity to push healthcare out onto our phones represents an enormous opportunity to take healthcare from a defensive state on our heels to an offensive, health-driven industry on our toes. Funding is following. We're seeing tremendous amount of deals done. I think this is going to be an amazing unlock. A mom who manages their child's diabetes, and let's be honest, it's almost always the mom, spends 5 months of her year managing that child's health care. And most of it is in time that's wasted, transportation, waiting, dealing with insurance companies. So this might be an incredible unlock that pushes preventive care and primary care out to 100 million Americans that really don't have access to it. I think that probably the biggest opportunity is in Fintech, or basically healthcare for women. If you think about it, they, again, like so many consumer categories, spend a lot more and influence the majority of spending in healthcare. Yet the industry, as it has done for a long time, kind of ignores them. Right now, 2% of healthcare funding goes to kind of distinctly or focused Fintech companies. Why is that? I think it's a proximity or a familiarity bias, where 40% of the venture capitalists are men from either Stanford or Harvard, 80% are men, and it's probably 90 to 95% of venture capital that is allocated by men. This is kind of the perfect analogy for what's gone on in healthcare in general. The most famous online health tech company was called HIMS. And the first products were a hair loss treatment and an ED treatment. And then they decided in 2018 to switch it to HIMS and HERS. This is basically a summary of medical research for the last 100 years in America. I want to bring attention to a company called Hey Jane, a startup that's focused on family planning through a remote device that gets around certain geographic constraints, offers anonymity. I think this is a huge opportunity. And when you have a lack of capital and a bigger market, I think that all adds up to higher returns. Fintech. So I think Overhyped is online trading platforms. So the number of options as a percentage of market has exploded because people see pictures of other people making money, and some online trading platforms have done a great job of convincing you that all you need to do is trade more, because that's how they make money, by selling order flow to get rich. But the reality is day trading, somewhere between 80 and 95% of day traders lose money, and their average loss is 36% of their capital that year. They're also inexperienced. You could look at this as half full, that this is about bringing a new cohort into investing. There's some very good things here. For the first time, this same proportion of people of color who own stocks has caught up with whites. So there's some very good things about this. The question is, are we setting up an entire generation of inexperienced investors who've never known anything but a bull market to get hurt very badly and lose all confidence in the market? When I look at Robinhood, 40% of their revenues this quarter came from cryptocurrency, and 60% of that was from Dogecoin. So you have a company that's as valuable as Barclays, more valuable than one of the biggest banks in Spain, bigger than Deutsche Bank, and it's got 25% of its revenues this quarter from Dogecoin, trading Dogecoin. I think that firm is very vulnerable. What's underhyped is online banking. I think that's going to be a much bigger industry, much more sustainable. If you think about operating systems, every company is trying to establish the operating system for media, for search, for your dating, for your media life. The operating system for our financial lives have loosely speaking been branches and ATMs. And people want new types of operating systems. And a lot of the traditional banks are focused on their legacy assets and are shutting down these legacy assets like crazy. 25% of America is still unbanked because they're seen as an unprofitable segment. So the innovators see huge opportunity and are coming in and trying to capture the 1.7 billion people in the world who are unbanked. Huge opportunity in Latin America, where the majority of people are unbanked. And Uwala, a firm I'm tracking closely in Argentina, 1 in 4 people under the age of 25 are now banking with Uwala on their phones. They've just launched in Mexico and are getting adoption there. They now have populations or customers that rival some of the biggest banks, and they're seeing valuations that dwarf traditional players. Transportation, overhyped space tourism. The Morning Network spent more time covering the launch of Jeff Bezos' rocket than they did on climate crisis in all of 2020. This Virgin Galactic, in my opinion, is in a word ridiculous. It is both supply and demand constrained, and the company is being valued at $11 million per people on the waiting list. This was an incredible branding event. The whole world saw this, and they built a staggering waiting list of 600 people. A good Starbucks can serve 600 people in 3 hours. Aston Martin gets $2 million valuation for every car it sells. I think space exploration is the equivalent of space execution. I don't think sending people to Mars is anything but a death sentence. And also, space travel is dangerous. We don't like to talk about it because it's scary, or you're seen as having bad juju or bad optimism. But the reality is it's more dangerous than almost any other activity you can think of. I want to acknowledge there hasn't been a launch-based fatality in over a decade, but this industry could be over in a flash. Going to Mars makes no sense. Here's the weather here, here's the weather on Mars today. I will say this though, the view on Mars will literally take your breath away, literally, as you can't breathe there. Underhyped, space hauling, actually putting stuff into space. We're going to go from 3,000 satellites to over 50 in just 10 years. And the companies that can haul that stuff into space are going to do really well. I thought the For All Mankind ridiculous trip 86 kilometers. We sent 3 people to a rock circling our planet 50 years ago, not knowing it, and then got them home safely at a period when a third of American homes didn't have indoor plumbing. And yet, for all mankind, when we send a rocket up for a few minutes to basically double the height of a Citation 10 or Satya Nadella's plane flying home last night, and we think it's for all mankind. Ridiculous. I will say this, I think SpaceX is blowing all the others out of the water in terms of the number of satellites and also the cost of lifting every kilogram into space. I think underrated is supersonic travel. I think people are more interested. I think the market is gigantic for people who can get to London in 3.5 hours. I think they'll pay $2,500, $10,000, even $20,000. I think that market is gigantic. I think that's going to be much bigger than a 600-person waiting list. The wealthiest people in the world have all one thing in common, and that is they've built time machines. I always say to a company that thinks they can get to $1 trillion, I'm like, what's your time machine? Prime saves you money. Netflix, you save 11 days of your kids' time because they don't watch commercials per year. Uber's a time machine, and I think Boom has an opportunity to be a big company. We also need to save more time, or I think one of the most underhyped parts of the world of Elon is actually the least talked about, and that is the boring company. A lot of our time is spent on very short commutes. New York to LaGuardia is only 9 miles, but it takes anywhere from 1 hour to 2 hours during the weekday. And I think this opportunity to save time or save time bringing stuff to you is exceptionally underhyped right now. And if you look at the amount of time it takes in major metros, death of cities has been hugely over-exaggerated. 2/3 of economic growth is still going to happen in cities. They're already recovering. But our ability to save time in cities, getting out, getting in, and getting our stuff in is going to be huge. Something that's overhyped, I love talking about overhyped technology. On this stage, I said 3D printing, wearables, VR were all overhyped. I think the new big overhyped one is self-driving. I don't think, according to Elon Musk 3 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, within a year there were going to be 1 million self-driving Teslas on the road. Business Insider said there would be 10 million. And so far there's 1,400. Funding is already starting to decline, and the hype is fading. The mentions are going down. We have software now, courtesy of mendacious companies, that will arbitrage people out of minimum wage, making human capital and drivers very cheap, and a lot of people just like to drive. So COVID brought the world to us. VR and wearables, I think, are hugely overhyped. I think virtual reality continues to be massively overhyped, and according to Mark Zuckerberg, legs are overhyped. I don't get this. If you look at the sales, 3.5 million sets. Crocs sold 69 million pairs last year. This is the number of units Google Glass and Snap spectacles. But for perspective, that yellow strip is all of Google and Snap wearables versus AirPods. If AirPods were its own company, it'd be a Fortune 50 company. Back to attracting a mate. I think you do this with AirPods and signaling wealth and that you get it and that you're a storyteller. I think you do it with a Rolex. We like to pretend resources don't matter. They hugely matter. Ray-Bans, want to look cool, want to be like Kara Swisher. Now, what if you don't want to have kids and you want to scare away mates? You can accomplish this. Let me know. I have a lot of experience here. Let me help you. Pay for dinner with a Discover card. Show up in a Mazda. Talk about how into magic you are. And show one of these. No kids. No kids. I thought that'd be funnier. The bloom is off the SPAC rose. We have a regression to mean. Canaries in the coal mine. Some of these SPACs are ridiculous. Some will endure. ESG branding is totally overhyped. The majority of ESG funds really don't comply with the Paris Accords. Europe actually implemented regulations around what it meant to say you were ESG, and the funding went down. That hasn't happened in the US. There's ridiculous SPACs. This is my latest target, Aspiration. They've decided that they are as a service, sustainability as a service. It's basically a debit card with a bad fund, sustainability fund that invests in Southwest Airlines. I don't see how that's sustainable. Less than 2% is truly ESG. So this is basically bad money management debit card trying to sell itself at 21 times revenues and spends 150% of its revenues on marketing. So they've come up with a new metric called EBITDAM, where they calculate profitability minus marketing. They don't include marketing in this calculation. Remember community-based EBITDA? Well, this is the new one, EBITDAM. I think the China crackdown story is really interesting. I've got to go fast, I'm almost out of time. The mother of all macro bets is shaping up, and that is Xi Jinping doing the following to its internet champions. Is he doing this? Or is he doing this?
Hey, God.
Shh, darling. Trust me.
God's sake.
It's for the best.
Hey, please.
Almost done.
I promise you, the more you watch this, it morphs from disturbing to disturbingly rewarding. It's a source of joy now. I promise you the next time you see this video, you will like it. There's a crackdown in China on things from private education to tutoring to social media to gaming to breaking up monopolies, and I think we should learn from what they've learned watching us. I think the algebra of deterrence is hugely underhyped. This is a LA story. If anybody calls you and offers your son an opportunity to get into Stanford by making donations to the sailing team, you're going to hang up. There's no algebra of deterrence in big tech. The algebra of deterrence is the likelihood of getting caught times the penalty relative to the upside. The upside is trillions of dollars. They get caught, but the penalty is almost meaningless. The algebra of deterrence does not work in big tech, and it needs to be restored. What if Michael Milken, with his Allbirds, born 30 years later, Patagonia vest, had started a Fintech company and was accused of insider trading today? Would he be sentenced to prison for 10 years? The question I get the most often at every one of these presentations, I've presented now to 88,000 people since COVID has started. About 6,000 of them were students at the following brands. I put these up there for credibility because I'm rabidly insecure, but they always have one question. What is the profound opportunity coming out of COVID? And I think this is the profound opportunity. And this is the same slide I give at the end of every presentation I have. And I ask people to ask themselves three questions. One, is this an opportunity to pivot to being a caregiver for someone in your life? Two, do you have the relationship with your siblings you want? If you were forced to say goodbye to one of them over FaceTime, is your relationship where you want it to be? And three, have you made the requisite investments in friendships? Or have you let competitiveness or perceived slights or other bullshit get in the way? And what is the key component across every study on happiness? And that is the depth and number of meaningful relationships in your life. We give medals to young people who demonstrate grace and forgiveness in crises. This is a crisis. Do you have the emotional, financial, and mental fitness and physical fitness to demonstrate that kind of grace and generosity? If you do, you can accomplish in months what otherwise might take years. And again, that is the repair and cementing of key relationships. So I'm going to wrap up. Low admissions rates, democratizing investing, space tourism, space exploration, self-driving cars, VR and wearables, SPACs, ESG branding, and fines, I believe, have not received or are overhyped or have gotten too much attention. Underhyped, public university brands, mating inequality, the disruption of healthcare, democratizing banking, space hauling, supersonic travel, the Boring Company, China crackdown, and algebra of deterrence are either undervalued or not receiving the attention they deserve. Okay.
West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountains, Shenandoah River. Life is old there, old.
Fucking do something. And how should they do it?
Yes.
I told you you would like it more the second time. We need a palate cleanser to finish up here. More than any content I put out, the content that gets the most response is when I talk about my dog. I went and got a Great Dane puppy as a reward to myself. My first job here was walking when I was 13 years old along Wilshire Boulevard, a 170-pound Great Dane called Thor. This is my visual image of me walking it at the age of 13, and I decided I wanted a Great Dane. So this is how it started, and this is how it's going. Now, I want you to scan your emotions right now. Everything I said before, you like a little bit more, or you hate a little bit less. Take this times 1 billion, and this is what big tech has done to all of us. Their personal stories, their likability. There are more people here spinning and manicuring their bullshit than there are journalists covering them. Hold them accountable. My name is Scott Galloway. I teach at NYU. I appreciate your time.